There exists a city where the moon hangs low and blood-red in the sky, where the streets run thick with crimson rivers, and where humanity's desperate search for transcendence led to a nightmare beyond comprehension. This is the story of Yharnam, a Gothic metropolis that once stood as a beacon of medical advancement and healing, only to descend into madness, transformation, and cosmic horror. It is a tale whispered in the darkest corners of gaming history, a narrative so deeply woven with Lovecraftian dread that players who venture into its depths emerge forever changed. Tonight, we pull back the veil on Bloodborne, a journey into the abyss where Victorian elegance meets eldritch terror, where hunters become the hunted, and where the line between human and beast dissolves into blood and madness. This is not merely a game, but a descent into the very nature of existence itself, a pilgrimage through nightmare realms where ancient gods dream and humanity pays the price for its hubris. Steel yourself, for we are about to explore the complete and terrible truth behind one of the most haunting stories ever told. The journey begins not with monsters or beasts, but with a simple act of desperation. Somewhere in the world, beyond the fog-shrouded borders of Yharnam, there exists a traveler seeking cure for an unnamed affliction. This traveler, whose identity remains ambiguous and whose face we never truly see, hears rumors of Yharnam's miraculous blood healing. The city has built its entire reputation on this foundation, this promise of salvation through blood ministration. People come from distant lands, crossing treacherous paths and abandoning their former lives, all for a chance at the healing blood that Yharnam offers so freely. Our protagonist is no different, arriving at the city gates with hope flickering like a candle in the darkness. The traveler signs a contract, a blood contract with the healing church, agreeing to the blood ministration procedure that will supposedly cure all ailments. Little does this desperate soul know that this single decision will transform them into something far beyond human, and thrust them into a nightmare that has been unfolding for generations. The blood ministration begins in a clinic, sterile and clinical, where strange figures in white administer the legendary blood of Yharnam. The procedure is quick, almost routine, as if the medical practitioners have performed this ritual thousands of times before. The traveler lies on a medical bed, and the blood enters their veins, warm and foreign, carrying with it the accumulated history of Yharnam's greatest achievements and darkest secrets. As consciousness fades, the traveler glimpses something impossible, a small creature with pale skin and red eyes, something that should not exist in the waking world. This is the first messenger, the first hint that the blood ministration is not what it seems. The traveler's vision blurs and darkens, and suddenly they are no longer in the clinic, but in a strange realm bathed in ethereal blue light. This is the hunter's dream, a pocket dimension that exists outside normal reality, created for a singular purpose that the traveler cannot yet comprehend. Here, they meet the doll, a life-sized porcelain figure who moves and speaks with gentle grace, welcoming the traveler with words that seem rehearsed yet sincere. The doll explains nothing, for she herself knows only what she has been designed to know, but her presence offers the first comfort in this bewildering new existence. The traveler awakens not in the clinic but in Yharnam's central district, lying in the street as night has fallen and the hunt is underway. The city has transformed from whatever daylight facade it might have worn into a realm of Gothic horror. Burning effigies light the streets with orange flame, casting dancing shadows on cobblestones slick with blood and other fluids best left unidentified. The air carries sounds that freeze the blood, the howls of beasts, the screams of the dying, the frantic laughter of hunters who have lost themselves to bloodlust. The traveler, now transformed into a hunter through the blood ministration, discovers weapons have been provided. A saw cleaver, brutal and efficient, designed to tear through flesh and bone with equal ease. There is no tutorial, no gentle introduction to this world of violence. The streets are filled with Yharnamites, the citizens of this once great city, but they are no longer fully human. They huddle in groups, wielding torches and pitchforks, their eyes reflecting firelight with an animal gleam. They attack on sight, driven by a madness that the hunter does not yet understand. These are not monsters but people, or what remains of people, who have succumbed to the beast plague that has infected Yharnam's population. The architecture of Yharnam tells its own story as the hunter moves through the city streets. Every building reaches upward with Gothic spires and buttresses, creating a vertical maze of stone and shadow. Gargoyles leer from rooftops, their stone faces frozen in expressions of terror or ecstasy, perhaps both. The city was clearly designed by minds obsessed with grandeur and religious symbolism. Every street corner featuring shrines to the healing church, every plaza dominated by statues of clergy in robes of stone. But now these monuments to faith and healing stand as silent witnesses to Yharnam's fall, surrounded by the shambling, mutating remnants of the population. The hunter encounters the first true beasts on these streets, humans whose transformation has progressed beyond the point of return. They walk on all fours now, their bodies elongated and twisted, fur sprouting from skin that once wore fine Victorian clothing. Their faces have pushed forward into snouts, teeth elongating into fangs, and all traces of humanity have been burned away by the beast within. They attack with animal ferocity, driven by hunger and rage, having forgotten language, civilization, and everything they once were. The hunter must kill them, not out of cruelty but necessity, for there is no cure, no salvation for those who have progressed this far into beasthood. As the hunter ventures deeper into central Yharnam, patterns begin to emerge from the chaos. The citizens who have not yet fully transformed speak in broken sentences about the blood, about the healing church, about how the ministration was supposed to save them but instead brought this plague upon their city. They speak of Father Gascoigne, a hunter who has gone missing somewhere in the city, and of the cathedral ward where the church maintains its power even as the city falls apart around it. The hunter learns that tonight is special, a night of the hunt when all citizens are ordered to remain indoors while hunters prowl the streets seeking beasts. But the line between hunter and hunted has blurred, for the hunters themselves often succumb to bloodlust, becoming the very monsters they swore to destroy. The hunt is eternal, a cycle that repeats every night in Yharnam, and the hunter is now part of this cycle, bound to it through the blood ministration that saved and cursed them in equal measure. The path leads inevitably toward the cathedral ward, the heart of the healing church's power in Yharnam. But reaching this sanctified district requires passing through areas of increasing horror and danger. The hunter must traverse the Great Bridge, a massive stone structure spanning a chasm filled with darkness, where the cleric beast waits. This creature represents the ultimate fate of those who partake too freely of the church's blood. Once human, perhaps even a member of the clergy given its name and location, the cleric beast has grown to enormous size, its body covered in matted fur and its head crowned with massive antlers. It clings to the side of the bridge, and when it sees the hunter, it unleashes a roar that shakes the stonework and echoes across the sleeping city. The battle is savage and desperate, the hunter's small form darting around the creature's massive limbs, seeking vulnerable points while avoiding crushing blows. When the cleric beast finally falls, dissolving into ash and blood, the hunter claims their first taste of true victory, but also their first glimpse of what awaits them should they lose themselves to the beast within. The cathedral ward opens before the hunter like a revelation of stone and faith. This district represents everything Yharnam aspired to be, with the grand cathedral dominating the skyline, its spires reaching toward a moon that never moves from its blood-red position overhead. The streets here are cleaner, more organized, clearly maintained by the church's resources even as the rest of the city falls into chaos. But the ward is not safe, merely more controlled. Church servants patrol the area, giants in robes carrying enormous hammers, their faces hidden by hoods, their purpose singular and absolute: protect the church's secrets at any cost. The hunter learns quickly that the church does not welcome questions or interference. Doors are locked, gates are barred, and access to the cathedral itself requires permission that the church does not freely give. The hunter must prove themselves worthy through blood and violence, ascending through the ranks of this night's hunt by defeating the beasts and hunters that plague the city. It is in the cathedral ward that the hunter first hears the name Lawrence, spoken in whispers by the dying and the mad. Lawrence was the founder of the healing church, the man who discovered the properties of old blood and built an entire religious institution around its miraculous healing properties. He was once a scholar at Byrgenwerth, the academic institution that first delved into the forbidden knowledge that would doom Yharnam. Lawrence's story is one of ambition and betrayal, of a student who took his master's warnings and cast them aside in pursuit of what he believed was humanity's salvation. He parted ways with Master Willem, the head of Bergenworth, who counseled patience and study, warning that humanity was not ready for the truths hidden in the blood. But Lawrence could not wait, could not accept that the power to heal all disease and extend human life indefinitely should be locked away in academic theory. He took samples of the old blood and founded the healing church in Yarnum, beginning the blood ministration that would make the city famous and eventually doom it to the beast plague. The hunter's path through Yarnum leads to a cemetery, tombstones leaning at odd angles in the darkness, where the sounds of battle and madness echo between ancient mausoleums. This is where Father Gascoigne can be found, and his story encapsulates the tragedy that befalls all hunters in Yarnum. Gascoigne came from a foreign land, drawn to Yarnum by tales of the hunt and the honor of becoming a church hunter. He was a family man, with a wife and daughters who depended on him, but he took up the hunt believing he could protect them from the beasts that prowled the night. Like all hunters, Gascoigne partook of the blood to enhance his abilities, to give him the strength and speed necessary to combat creatures far beyond normal human capacity. The blood worked exactly as promised, transforming him into a formidable warrior capable of feats no ordinary man could accomplish. He stalked the streets at night, his axe and blunderbuss dealing death to beasts, earning respect and fear from both citizens and fellow hunters. But the blood always demands its price, and for hunters, that price is their humanity. The hunter encounters Gascoigne not as an ally but as an enemy, for the father has finally succumbed to the bloodlust that claims all hunters eventually. He stands in the cemetery, having just killed a beast, his weapons still dripping with gore, and when he sees the hunter approaching, he mistakes them for another beast to be slain. Gascoigne's speech is slurred and broken, his mind fragmenting under the weight of too many hunts, too much blood, too much violence committed in the name of protecting the innocent. He attacks with the fury of a cornered animal, his movements still skilled but driven now by instinct rather than thought. The battle between hunters is different from fighting beasts, for Gascoigne retains his weapons training and tactical awareness even as his humanity slips away. He dodges and counterattacks, uses his blunderbuss to interrupt the hunter's movements, and transforms his axe between one-handed and two-handed forms with practiced ease. The fight is a dance of death between two individuals who might have been allies in a saner world. As the battle reaches its climax, Gascoigne's transformation completes. His body begins to change, bones cracking and reforming, fur erupting from skin, his face pushing forward into a bestial snout. The father becomes a beast, losing the last vestiges of the man he once was, the man who loved his family and believed he was protecting them. Now he is only rage and hunger, attacking with claws and teeth, howling at the red moon that watches impassively overhead. The hunter must strike him down, not out of cruelty but mercy, for there is no saving someone who has progressed this far into beasthood. When Gascoigne falls, his body dissolving into ash, the hunter finds a music box among his possessions, a trinket that belonged to his daughter. The music box plays a haunting melody, a reminder that Gascoigne was human once, that he had a life and family and dreams that did not involve becoming a monster in a cursed city. His death is not a victory but a tragedy, one repeated countless times throughout Yarnum's history as hunter after hunter succumbs to the same inevitable transformation. Beyond the cathedral ward lies a path that leads away from civilization and into the wilderness that surrounds Yarnum. The Forbidden Woods earned their name through the secrets they conceal and the dangers they harbor. The Healing Church forbids entry to these woods, posting guards and locks to prevent the curious from venturing into the tangled forest. But the hunter has learned that the church's prohibitions usually indicate something worth discovering, and the path to understanding Yarnum's curse leads inevitably into these forbidden depths. The woods are ancient, with trees that have stood for centuries, their branches interwoven into a canopy that blocks out even the red moon's light. The darkness here is absolute, broken only by lanterns and torches that cast small pools of illumination in an ocean of shadow. The paths wind and twist, leading in circles, deliberately confusing to prevent outsiders from reaching what lies at the wood's heart. The inhabitants of the Forbidden Woods are not the citizens of Yharnam but something older and stranger. Snake-bearing men dwell here, their bodies infested with parasites that writhe beneath their skin and burst forth to attack intruders. These are not victims of the beast plague but carriers of a different affliction, one connected to the ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge that predate the healing church. The hunter must navigate carefully, for the woods are filled with traps and ambushes, with poison swamps and hidden pathways. The further one ventures into the forest, the more the architecture of civilization gives way to primitive structures and ritualistic sites. There are signs of worship here, crude altars stained with blood both old and fresh, symbols carved into trees and rocks, all pointing toward something that the people of these woods revere with fanatic devotion. At the heart of the Forbidden Woods, across a lake shrouded in perpetual mist, stands Byrgenwerth. This academic institution represents where Yharnam's nightmare truly began, where scholars first delved into knowledge that humanity was never meant to possess. The building is modest compared to the Grand Cathedral, more university than church, with libraries and lecture halls instead of chapels and confessionals. But within these walls, Master Willem and his students, including the ambitious Lawrence, first discovered the old blood and the cosmic truths it contained. Byrgenwerth's scholars were obsessed with evolution, with elevating humanity beyond its limited physical form, with gaining the eyes that would allow humans to see and understand the higher planes of existence that the Great Ones inhabit. They studied ancient civilizations that had vanished mysteriously, leaving behind only ruins and cryptic texts. They explored underground tombs and catacombs, seeking artifacts and knowledge from cultures that had glimpsed the cosmic truth and either ascended or were destroyed by what they found. Master Willem still resides in Byrgenwerth, though he is far from the vital scholar he once was. The hunter finds him sitting in a chair overlooking the lake, his body ancient and withered, his eyes clouded but seeing far more than any human should. Willem has lined his brain with eyes, following his own teachings about gaining insight, and the knowledge he has acquired has rendered him virtually catatonic, capable of minimal movement or speech. He rocks gently in his chair, staring out at the lake, and when the hunter approaches, he raises one trembling hand to point at the water. The gesture is simple but laden with meaning, for beneath the lake's surface lurks Byrgenwerth's greatest secret and most terrible mistake. The Rom, the vacuous spider, rests in the depths, a great one that the scholars made contact with decades ago. Rom is not naturally of this world but was once human, a student or experiment that Willem elevated to a higher plane of existence through rituals and the application of old blood. But the ascension was imperfect, leaving Rom trapped in a form that is neither fully human nor fully transcendent, a cosmic being with the mind of an infant. The hunter must descend into the lake to confront Rom, wading through water that reflects the red moon's light like liquid blood. Rom appears as a massive pale spider, her body bloated and studded with crystalline growths, her movements slow and deliberate. She does not attack directly but relies on her spider children to defend her, countless smaller versions of herself that swarm around intruders. The battle is surreal, taking place in shallow water beneath a sky that seems to press down with cosmic weight. Rom's purpose in this lake is not malevolent but protective. She serves as a barrier, a veil that separates humanity from truths too terrible for mortal minds to comprehend. Master Willem placed her here, or allowed her to remain here, knowing that as long as Rom lived, the full horror of Yharnam's situation would remain hidden from both the citizens and the Great Ones that hunger for human insight. Rom is merciful in her ignorance, maintaining a state of unknowing that protects humanity from its own curiosity and the attention of beings beyond human comprehension. When the hunter finally defeats Rom, striking her bloated body until it can no longer sustain life, the change is immediate and catastrophic. The sky itself transforms, the red moon intensifying into a blood moon of such vivid crimson that it bathes everything in sanguine light. The veil that Rom maintained shatters like glass, and suddenly the hunter can see what was always there but hidden from mortal sight. Amygdalas cling to buildings throughout Yharnam, enormous creatures with elongated heads and countless arms, their bodies defying conventional geometry. They have been there all along, invisible to those without sufficient insight, watching and waiting. The Great Ones have always been present in Yharnam, drawn by the healing church's use of old blood and the scholar's attempts to ascend to higher planes of existence. Ram's death announces to these cosmic entities that humanity has achieved enough insight to perceive them, and the barrier between worlds becomes dangerously thin. The hunter returns to Yharnam to find the city transformed under the blood moon. What was horrifying before has become nightmarish beyond description. New creatures prowl the streets, things that were not present during the early hunt. Brain trusts emerge from hiding, masses of knowledge-hungry flesh that drain insight from anyone who approaches. The mad ones, humans who have seen too much and whose minds have shattered under the weight of cosmic truth, wander aimlessly, their bodies twisted into impossible forms. The healing church's ministrations have taken on new horror, for with the veil lifted, it becomes clear that the old blood flowing through Yharnam's veins is not human blood enhanced but the blood of great ones, cosmic entities whose very essence is incompatible with human physiology. The beast plague is not a disease but a transformation. The human body's attempt to cope with hosting divine blood, resulting in devolution into animal forms as the only alternative to complete physical collapse. The blood moon reveals a location that was hidden before, a district of Yharnam that existed in a state of temporal displacement, visible only to those with sufficient insight or when the cosmic barriers weakened. Yahar'gul, the unseen village, is a nightmare realm that exists parallel to the waking world of Yharnam. The hunter may have glimpsed this place earlier, kidnapped briefly by bag-carrying giants who roam the city streets looking for victims to abduct. Yahar'gul is where the School of Menses conducts its secret rituals, a faction that split from both Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church, believing that both institutions were too timid in their approach to ascension. The Menses scholars wanted to contact the Great Ones directly, to force communion with higher beings rather than waiting for invitation or slowly accumulating insight through study. They established themselves in Yahar'gul and began experiments that made even the Healing Church's blood ministration seem tame by comparison. The village is filled with evidence of the Menses school's mad ambition. Corpses line the streets, bodies of citizens who were used as ritual fodder, their deaths serving to fuel the ceremony that Menses hoped would elevate all of humanity at once. The buildings are connected by chains and bridges, creating a vertical maze that defies normal architectural logic, as if the very structure of Yahar'gul has been warped by the ritual's power. Great bells hang throughout the village, and bell-ringing women roam the streets, their constant chiming attracting and empowering the creatures that serve the Menses cause. The hunter encounters the school's guardians, reanimated corpses powered by cosmic energy, and beasts far more powerful than those found in central Yharnam. But the true horror of Yahar'gul is what the hunter can see from its highest points, the massive amygdala that clings to the village's chapel, and beyond it, deeper into the nightmare, the ritual chamber where Menses scholars attempted to birth their own Great One. The One Reborn is Menses's greatest achievement and most terrible failure. This creature is not a natural Great One but an artificial one, created by combining countless corpses into a single massive entity and attempting to elevate it through ritual and sacrifice. The result is a writhing mass of bodies, flesh, and bone, a monstrosity that exists in constant agony, its many components fighting for dominance within the unified whole. It hangs above Yahar'gul's chapel, suspended in a state between life and death, between human and divine, achieving neither. The Menses scholars believed that creating a Great One would give them direct access to cosmic knowledge and power, but all they created was suffering given form. The hunter must destroy this abomination, climbing through Yahar'gul's twisted architecture to reach and kill the Bell Maidens who maintain the ritual, then confronting the One Reborn itself in a battle that is more mercy-killing than heroic combat. Beyond the death of the One Reborn lies the true heart of the Menses ritual, accessible only by venturing into the nightmare realm that the school created. The nightmare of Menses is not part of the waking world at all but a separate dimension constructed through ritual sacrifice and cosmic contact. The hunter enters this realm through a portal, stepping from Yahar'gul's bloody streets into a place where physics and logic no longer apply consistently. The architecture here is impossible, with staircases that lead to nowhere, bridges that connect across vast distances, and rooms that exist in multiple locations simultaneously. The sky is not sky but a swirling mass of cosmic horror, and standing in the distance, visible from almost anywhere in the nightmare, is the source of Mencys's power and doom. The brain of Mencies hangs in space, a massive organic structure pulsing with malevolent intelligence, radiating frenzy that drives mad anyone who looks upon it too long. Michaelash, the host of the Nightmare of Mencies, still resides in this realm even though his physical body has long since died. He exists as a ghost or projection, trapped in the nightmare his ritual created, unable to escape but unwilling to abandon his life's work. The hunter pursues him through halls that seem to shift and change, through mirrors that may or may not be portals, through a maze designed more by madness than intent. Michaelash runs from the hunter but also taunts them, speaking in riddles and fragments of cosmic knowledge, his mind fractured by prolonged exposure to truths that no human mind was meant to contain. He speaks of Kos or Cosm, of the fishing hamlet, of sins committed long ago that echo through time and nightmare. He giggles and screams in equal measure, sometimes addressing the hunter, sometimes speaking to beings that exist only in his fractured perception. When cornered, Michaelash finally fights, using arcane powers gifted by his communion with the Great Ones, calling down cosmic energy to blast the hunter, summoning tentacles that erupt from portals in reality. The death of Michaelash ends the Nightmare of Mencies but does not undo the damage the ritual caused. The hunter gains access to the highest reaches of the nightmare, where the brain of Mencies can be confronted directly. This massive organ, this thinking mass of tissue larger than most buildings, represents the Mencies scholar's greatest discovery and most terrible mistake. They made contact with a Great One's consciousness, drawing its attention to Yharnam, and in doing so, they doomed the city to cosmic awareness. The brain radiates frenzy, a madness that cannot be resisted by anyone who gazes upon it, causing those afflicted to turn their violence inward, attacking themselves in desperate attempts to claw out their own eyes and end the visions the brain forces into their minds. The hunter must kill this entity, not through direct combat, but by first lowering it from its position in the nightmare sky, making it vulnerable, then destroying its physical form in an underground chamber where it can no longer use its cosmic position as defense. While the Nightmare of Mencies represents one faction's attempt to contact the Great Ones, the Healing Church pursued its own parallel research into cosmic communion. The Upper Cathedral Ward, hidden above the regular cathedral and accessible only through secret passages, served as the church's primary research facility for their most forbidden experiments. The area is desolate now, long abandoned but not empty, for the experiments left behind continue to live in the darkness. The hunter navigates through halls lined with cells where church doctors conducted experiments on living subjects, testing the limits of blood ministration, attempting to create new forms of hunters or perhaps new forms of humans entirely. The results of these experiments shamble through the shadows, blind creatures with elongated bodies and heads dominated by enormous exposed brains. They were once humans, perhaps willing participants in the church's research, but the procedures transformed them into something that hunts by sound alone, lunging with terrifying speed at any noise in their domain. At the heart of the Upper Cathedral, in a chamber that resembles more a shrine than a laboratory, the hunter discovers Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. This is a true Great One, not artificially created like the One Reborn, not a transformed human like Ram, but an actual cosmic entity that exists on a higher plane of reality. The Healing Church found Ebrietas in the ancient labyrinths beneath Yharnam, discovering her abandoned or left behind by other Great Ones. She was alone, possibly the last of her kind in this realm, and the church saw in her an opportunity. They established communion with Ebrietas, learning from her the secrets of old blood, using samples of her own blood to create the healing ministrations that made Yharnam famous. She became the foundation of the church's power, a living saint kept hidden in the Upper Cathedral, worshipped and studied in equal measure. The church doctors would kneel before her, receiving visions and knowledge, believing themselves blessed by cosmic favor. Ebrietas is not hostile by nature, existing in a state of mourning for her own kind, grieving losses that occurred long before humanity existed. But she will defend herself if threatened, and the hunter's intrusion into her chamber forces confrontation. The battle against a true Great One is unlike fighting beasts or mad humans. Ebrietas possesses power over space itself, creating explosions of cosmic energy, summoning pillars of force that erupt from the ground, using her massive body as a weapon while maintaining perfect awareness of her surroundings. Her movements are alien, following patterns that seem random but are actually operating on a logic humans cannot perceive. She bleeds light instead of blood, and her cries echo not just in the chamber but in the hunter's mind, bypassing ears entirely to resonate directly with consciousness. Defeating her requires not just skill but an understanding that the hunter is fighting something fundamentally superior in every way except the mortal determination to survive. The nightmare realms extend beyond what the Menses ritual created, for nightmares in Bloodborne are real places where consciousness goes when freed from physical constraints. The hunter's dream is one such realm, and there are others, pocket dimensions created by trauma, guilt, and the attention of great ones. The hunter's nightmare is perhaps the most tragic of these places, a realm created specifically to trap the hunters who committed the greatest sins in Yharnam's history. This nightmare mirrors Yharnam itself but in a corrupted, endless form where the hunt never ends and the hunters are doomed to fight eternally, unable to die permanently, unable to rest, trapped in an endless cycle of violence and resurrection. The hunter ventures into this nightmare through a blood-drunk hunter who appears in the waking world, following a trail that leads through distorted versions of familiar locations. The old hunters who inhabit this nightmare are legends in Yharnam's history, the first generation of church hunters who established the traditions and techniques that later hunters would follow. Ludwig, the Holy Blade, was the first church hunter and established the entire hunter workshop system. He was a knight in the truest sense, believing in the righteousness of the hunt, crafting the holy moonlight sword that would become his signature weapon. But Ludwig fell to the beast plague like so many others, his transformation particularly severe, turning him into a massive horse-like creature that retains only fragments of his former nobility. The hunter encounters him in the nightmare, a beast so large and deformed that his human origins are nearly impossible to discern, screaming and attacking with mindless fury. But if the hunter can survive the battle and restore Ludwig's legendary sword to him in his final moments, a glimmer of humanity returns. Ludwig sees his blade, remembers who he was, and dies with a smile, believing that the hunt he championed was righteous and good, never learning the terrible truth of what his service to the church enabled. Lady Maria serves as another guardian of the hunter's nightmare, specifically protecting the path to the nightmare's deepest and most terrible secret. She was a student of Gehrman, the first hunter, and one of the most skilled warriors to ever live in Yharnam. But Maria abandoned the hunt after participating in an event so traumatic that she discarded her beloved weapons and sealed herself away as a guardian and penance both. She sits in a chair in the astral clock tower, appearing as a corpse until the hunter approaches too closely. Then she rises, taking up weapons similar to those she once threw away, fighting with a grace and ferocity that surpasses almost anything else in the nightmare. Maria does not fight because she wants to but because she must, preventing anyone from reaching the fishing hamlet beyond, where the sin that created the hunter's nightmare was committed. Her blood techniques, using her own vital fluid as a weapon, are beautiful and deadly, creating arcs of blood that freeze in the air before detonating. Defeating her is necessary but tragic, for Maria is not evil but guilt-ridden, punishing herself eternally for crimes committed under church orders. Beyond Maria's protection lies the fishing hamlet, a coastal village that existed long before Yharnam, a settlement of simple people who lived by the sea and worshipped the great ones in their own way. The villagers had a relationship with Kos or Kazım, a great one who washed ashore, either dead or dying, and lay on their beach. The villagers revered Kos, and she blessed them in return, though her blessings were strange and transformative, making the villagers something other than purely human. But the scholars of Byrgenwerth discovered this hamlet, and seeing in Kos an opportunity to study a great one directly, they came with hunters to protect them and proceeded to desecrate both the corpse of Kos and the villagers who worshipped her. They cut into the great one's body, extracted samples, killed or experimented on the villagers, and committed atrocities in the name of knowledge. This sin, more than any other, drew the attention and wrath of the great ones upon Yharnam, creating the hunter's nightmare as eternal punishment and ensuring that the city would suffer for its scholars' hubris. All paths in Bloodborne eventually lead back to the hunter's dream and the truth of what it represents. Gehrman, the first hunter, created this pocket dimension or was instrumental in its creation, though the full circumstances remain deliberately obscure. He resides in the dream's workshop, sitting in a wheelchair by a field of white flowers, waiting for hunters to return from the night's hunt. Gehrman is ancient, having lived through multiple generations of Yharnam's history, and he is trapped in the dream, unable to die, unable to leave, serving as a mentor and guide to the hunters who pass through. He teaches combat techniques, offers cryptic advice, and maintains the hunter's dream as a sanctuary from the horrors of Yharnam. But there is profound sadness in Gehrman, a weariness that comes from witnessing countless hunters come and go, watching them struggle and die and occasionally succeed, knowing that the hunt itself is endless and that his role in perpetuating it makes him complicit in their suffering. The doll who serves the hunter in the dream is Gehrman's creation, modeled after Lady Maria, whom he loved but who did not return his affections in the way he desired. The doll is both puppet and person, animated by forces that Gehrman does not fully control, possessing awareness and perhaps even a soul, though her nature remains ambiguous. She cares for the hunters genuinely, offering encouragement and assistance, helping them grow stronger by channeling the blood echoes they collect into increased physical and mental capabilities. The doll represents the one purely kind presence in Bloodborne's entire narrative, never hostile, never cruel, existing only to help hunters survive the nightmare they have been thrust into. Through her, Gehrman's better nature manifests, his desire to protect and nurture even as he is forced to send hunters into danger repeatedly. The truth of the hunter's dream is that it serves as a trap created by the moon presence, one of the most powerful great ones, specifically designed to perpetuate the hunt forever. The moon presence bound Gehrman to this service, creating the dream as a realm where hunters could die and resurrect repeatedly, allowing them to become stronger than any normal human, creating perfect weapons for hunting beasts and other great ones. The moon presence feeds on this cycle, using the hunt and the hunters as a means to eliminate other great ones and maintain its own position of power. Every hunter who accepts the blood ministration and awakens in the dream becomes bound to this cycle, forced to hunt through Yharnam's long night until they either succeed in their mission or lose themselves to madness or beasthood. The contract signed at the beginning, that blood contract that seemed merely a formality, was actually a binding agreement that gave the moon presence claim to the hunter's soul and service. As the night of the hunt reaches its conclusion, with Rum dead, the blood moon hanging overhead, and the major threats to Yharnam defeated or at least understood, the hunter returns to the dream to find Gehrman waiting with a choice. He offers release, the chance to wake from the dream and return to normal life, believing the hunter has done enough, has suffered enough in service to a hunt they never truly understood. If the hunter accepts this offer, Gehrman stands from his wheelchair, taking up his burial blade, a weapon designed specifically to kill hunters and free them from the dream's grasp. The old man fights with techniques he taught to generations of hunters, his moves elegant despite his age and infirmity, and when he strikes the final blow, it is with something resembling kindness. The hunter wakes in the morning streets of Yharnam, the night finally over, the dream fading like all dreams do. They rise and walk away, leaving the city behind, believing themselves free. But memory fades as well, and soon the hunter cannot quite remember what transpired in that long night, the horrors becoming vague nightmares, easily dismissed in the light of day. They move on with their life, never knowing that the hunt continues without them, that new hunters are even now accepting blood ministrations and awakening in the dream. But the hunter can refuse Gehrman's offer, can choose to continue the hunt, recognizing that accepting release would simply allow the cycle to continue with someone else. If the hunter resists, Gehrman becomes hostile, not out of malice but out of a desperate desire to free at least this one hunter from the curse he himself suffers under. The battle between hunter and first hunter is fierce, two warriors using similar techniques but separated by generations of experience and countless nights of practice. When Gehrman falls, he does so with relief, welcoming death or at least rest, having finally lost to someone strong enough to resist the dream's grip. But his death does not end the dream, for Gehrman was never its true master. The moon presence descends from the blood moon itself, a pale, emaciated creature with elongated limbs and a head that seems perpetually screaming. This great one created the dream and bound Gehrman to its service, and now it attempts to bind the hunter as well, reaching out with ethereal power to claim a new servant. If the hunter has not consumed enough umbilical cords, fragments of Great One infants found throughout Yharnam's nightmare, then the moon presence succeeds in its binding. The hunter awakens in Gehrman's wheelchair, taking the first hunter's place, becoming the new host of the dream, doomed to guide future hunters through endless nights of hunting, perpetuating the cycle they tried to break. But if the hunter has consumed 3 or more umbilical cords, if they have gained sufficient insight into the nature of the Great Ones and the cosmic truth underlying Yharnam's curse, something different occurs. The moon presence's binding fails, for the hunter has begun their own transformation into a Great One, ascending beyond human limitations. The battle between hunter and moon presence is brief, for the cosmic entity never expected resistance, and when it falls, the hunter's transformation completes. They collapse into an infantile form, becoming a slug-like creature that the doll picks up gently, cradling as one would a newborn. The hunter has achieved what the scholars of Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church and the School of Menses all sought, true ascension to a higher plane of existence. But the cost was everything that made them human, and their new form is helpless, dependent on the doll's care, beginning existence as a Great One as an infant with no memory of what they sacrificed to achieve this transformation. Throughout the hunter's journey through Yharnam and its many nightmare realms, fragments of cosmic truth accumulate, pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, reveal the fundamental horror underlying the entire narrative. The Great Ones are not evil in any conventional sense, but are beings that exist on a plane so far removed from human understanding that their actions and motivations appear incomprehensible. They are driven by a singular tragedy. The Great Ones cannot produce healthy offspring. Every attempt they make to reproduce results in stillbirths or children that die shortly after birth. This drives them to madness of a sort, a grief so profound that it transcends individual consciousness and becomes a defining characteristic of their entire species. They seek surrogate children, looking to lesser species to provide what they cannot create themselves, particularly targeting humanity because of humans' ability to birth live young consistently. The entire disaster that befell Yharnam stems from this cosmic tragedy intersecting with human ambition. When Byrgenwerth scholars made contact with the Great Ones through the ancient labyrinths beneath the city, when they discovered the old blood and began experimenting with it, they inadvertently announced humanity's presence to beings who desperately sought what humans possessed. The Great Ones responded, offering knowledge, power, and the miraculous healing properties of their blood, but always with the underlying hope that humans might provide them with the children they could not create. The blood ministration that the Healing Church promoted was never purely about healing, but was the Great Ones' attempt to elevate humanity to a point where they could serve as surrogate mothers to infant Great Ones. Every person who received the ministration became a potential vessel, and the transformations, the beast plague, the madness, all were side effects of human bodies trying and failing to host cosmic divinity. The umbilical cords that the hunter finds throughout the game represent failed attempts at this reproduction. Each cord came from an infant Great One that died shortly after birth, their remains preserved by those who sought to study or worship them. Murgo, the child of Queen Yharnam, was such an infant, a Great One born to a human mother, the culmination of experiments and rituals conducted in the ancient Themerian civilization that existed long before Yharnam. But Murgo was stillborn or died shortly after birth, and the mother's grief created the nightmare of Menses, a realm built from maternal loss and rage. The wet nurse that guards Murgo's loft in the nightmare is not a creature but a manifestation of protective instincts given terrible form, a mother's desperate desire to shield her child from a world that has already taken them from her. The fight against Murgo's wet nurse is not heroic but tragic, the hunter battling a mother's love that has become monstrous through grief and the warping influence of the nightmare. Beneath Yharnam, beneath even the ancient foundations upon which the city was built, lie the Themerian labyrinths, a network of catacombs and tombs that extend impossibly deep into the earth. The Themerians were a civilization that existed thousands of years before current events, possibly the first human society to make contact with the Great Ones. They built their entire culture around this cosmic communion, creating a theocracy ruled by a queen who could communicate directly with the higher beings. The Themerians were granted knowledge and power in exchange for their service, and they used this power to build vast underground cities and tombs designed to last for eternity. But the bargain they made with the Great Ones came with the same price that would later doom Yharnam. They became vessels and experiments in the Great One's desperate attempt to produce viable offspring. The hunter can explore these labyrinths through chalice rituals, diving deeper and deeper into increasingly ancient and hostile depths. The Themirians who remain in these tombs are not living but undead, sustained by the same cosmic power that corrupts and transforms. They guard their sacred spaces fanatically, attacking intruders with weapons that should have crumbled to dust millennia ago. The deeper labyrinths contain horrors that make Yharnam's beasts seem tame by comparison. Bloated creatures made entirely from corpse parts, bell-ringing maidens who summon endless reinforcements, and bosses who wield cosmic power casually. The architecture becomes increasingly alien the deeper one descends, with impossible geometries and spaces that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. These depths are where Byrgenwerth scholars first found evidence of the Old Blood and the Great Ones, excavating ancient artifacts and texts that would eventually doom Yharnam to repeat the Themirians' mistakes. Queen Yharnam herself still exists in these depths, eternally pregnant with the child Murgo who was taken from her. She appears throughout the hunter's journey, a spectral figure bleeding from wounds that never heal, clutching her belly protectively, weeping for the loss she suffered. Her sorrow created ripples through time and nightmare, and her desire for vengeance against those who took her child contributed to the curses that plague Yharnam. The scholars who founded the Healing Church discovered her or her legend, and in their ambition, they attempted to replicate the Themirian success at birthing Great Ones without understanding the full cost. The name Yharnam for the city was not coincidental but an invocation, an attempt to channel the queen's power and favor. But they succeeded only in channeling her grief and curse, bringing down upon their city the same doom that befell the Themirian civilization. Throughout the hunter's journey, they accumulate insight, a numerical representation of cosmic awareness and understanding. Every encounter with the strange, every boss defeated, every hidden truth uncovered grants insight, and as this insight increases, the hunter's perception of reality changes. Things that were invisible become visible. Enemies that seemed straightforward reveal additional attacks and behaviors. The entire world shifts subtly, becoming stranger and more overtly hostile the more the hunter understands about its true nature. This game mechanic is actually a narrative element, representing the Lovecraftian truth that knowledge itself is dangerous, that understanding cosmic reality is not enlightening but maddening. The human mind was never designed to comprehend the universe as it truly exists. The Great Ones, the nightmare realms, the fundamental nature of blood and evolution, all of these truths operate on logic that contradicts human understanding of life, death, and meaning. As the hunter gains insight, their brain literally changes, developing more capacity for perception but at the cost of sanity and humanity. The frenzy status that builds when facing certain enemies or looking at specific cosmic entities represents the mind breaking under the weight of what it perceives. Humans are not meant to see amygdalas clinging to buildings or understand that the blood they have been drinking is cosmic essence rather than medicine. Each revelation chips away at the foundation of human consciousness, replacing comfortable ignorance with terrible knowledge. The scholars of Byrgenwerth understood this danger, which is why Master Willem counseled his students to fear the old blood and to line their brains with eyes rather than directly consuming the blood. Eyes provide perception without direct contact, allowing one to see cosmic truth without incorporating it into one's physical body. But even this approach led to madness for most who attempted it. The church doctors in the upper cathedral ward, the Menzies scholars who performed the ritual, even Willem himself, all lost their humanity in pursuit of understanding. They became so focused on achieving insight that they forgot what they were sacrificing, becoming vessels for knowledge but losing everything that made knowledge worth pursuing. The true horror of Bloodborne is not the beasts or the Great Ones but the realization that seeking truth and understanding, the most noble of human endeavors, leads inevitably to losing one's humanity and becoming something else entirely. The identity of the hunter, the protagonist through whom players experience Bloodborne's narrative, remains deliberately ambiguous throughout the game. They are a blank slate, foreign to Yharnam, with no established background or personality beyond what players project onto them through their actions. This ambiguity is not a weakness but a strength, allowing the hunter to represent anyone who has ever sought cure for suffering, anyone who has made a desperate choice without fully understanding the consequences, anyone who has been drawn into a situation far beyond their comprehension and forced to adapt or die. The hunter could be male or female, young or old, from any nation or culture, for the blood ministration and the nightmare that follows care nothing for such mortal distinctions. What defines the hunter is not their past but their persistence. They die repeatedly throughout the night, killed by beasts, by other hunters, by cosmic entities, and each time they resurrect in the hunter's dream, return to life through the contract they signed and the power of the moon presence. This cycle of death and resurrection, so familiar to players as a game mechanic, is actually a narrative element. The hunter is trapped in a time loop of sorts, reliving the same night repeatedly, dying and learning and growing stronger through each iteration. The blood echoes they collect from fallen enemies represent stolen life force, the accumulated experience and power of those they kill, consumed to enhance their own capabilities. This is not heroic but vampiric, the hunter surviving by draining the essence of others, becoming more powerful and less human with each death they inflict. The player's choice at the end of the game, whether to accept Gehrman's offer of release, to fight and take his place, or to resist the moon presence and ascend to become a great one, represents three different philosophies on how to respond to cosmic horror. Accepting release represents choosing ignorance, walking away from terrible knowledge to live a normal life, believing that some truths are not worth knowing. Taking Gehrman's place represents acceptance of one's role in a cycle, choosing to suffer so that others might have guidance, becoming a martyr to an endless cause. Ascending to become a great one represents the ultimate ambition, choosing transformation over humanity, believing that becoming something greater is worth losing everything that made you who you were. None of these endings are purely good or evil, right or wrong, but rather different responses to an impossible situation where every choice has profound consequences. Blood flows through every aspect of Bloodborne's narrative, both literally and symbolically. It is medicine and poison, salvation and curse, the source of all power and the cause of all suffering. The Victorian fascination with blood transfusions and medical science is taken to its horrifying extreme in Yharnam, where blood has become both religion and science, worshipped and studied with equal fervor. The Healing Church's entire theology is built around blood, with clergy members called blood saints, rituals involving blood consumption, and the promise that purified blood can elevate humanity beyond its current limitations. But this obsession with blood as a purifying and transformative substance ignores the fundamental truth that blood is also a carrier of disease, corruption, and inherited traits. By making blood sacred and consuming it indiscriminately, Yharnam's citizens open themselves to infection not by mundane disease, but by cosmic essence that their bodies could not safely process. The beast plague that ravages Yharnam is transmitted through blood, passed from one person to another through the very ministrations meant to heal them. The Healing Church inadvertently created a plague vector through their most sacred ritual, ensuring that every person they treated became a potential carrier of the scourge. The transformation into beasts is not random but follows patterns based on the individual's nature and how their body responds to the old blood coursing through their veins. Those who give in to base instincts, who embrace violence and passion without restraint, transform faster and more completely. Those who try to resist, who cling to their humanity and reason, might delay the transformation but cannot prevent it entirely. The blood always wins in the end, reshaping the host to accommodate the cosmic essence it carries, and human form is simply not compatible with divinity. Transcendence, the elevation of humanity beyond its current state, is the goal that drives almost every faction in Bloodborne's narrative. Byrgenwerth seeks transcendence through knowledge and insight, believing that understanding the universe will allow humans to evolve beyond physical limitations. The Healing Church seeks transcendence through blood and faith, believing that consuming divine essence will purify and elevate the human form. The School of Menses seeks transcendence through ritual and force, attempting to compel the Great Ones to share their power. But every attempt at transcendence in Bloodborne ends in tragedy, mutation, and loss of humanity. The scholars go mad, the faithful become beasts, the ritualists create monstrosities, and those few who actually achieve something resembling ascension find themselves transformed into entities so alien that their human identities are completely erased. The game asks whether transcendence is worth pursuing if the cost is losing everything that makes you human, if becoming more means becoming something else entirely. Bloodborne's aesthetic and atmosphere are deeply rooted in Gothic horror tradition and Victorian sensibilities. Yharnam is a city of the late 19th century, with gas lamps lighting cobblestone streets, citizens dressed in period-appropriate clothing, and architecture that combines medieval Gothic styles with Victorian industrial elements. The city is all vertical lines and pointed arches, shadows and fog, a place where modern rationalism meets ancient superstition. This setting is not arbitrary but essential to the game's themes. The Victorian era was a time of tremendous confidence in human progress, when medical science, industrial technology, and empirical research were transforming society at an unprecedented rate. It was an age that believed humanity could solve any problem through reason and innovation, that the natural world could be tamed and understood through scientific method. But the Victorian era was also marked by anxiety about what progress might cost. The rapid industrialization created slums and pollution alongside wealth and comfort. Medical advances like blood transfusion saved lives but also killed patients through infections and incompatibilities that doctors did not yet understand. The scientific worldview was replacing religious certainty, leaving many feeling unmoored from traditional sources of meaning and community. Gothic literature emerged during this period precisely because it expressed these anxieties through narratives of reason failing, of science creating monsters, of ancient evils proving immune to modern solutions. Bloodborne channels this Gothic tradition by showing a city that believed its medical advances had conquered disease and death, only to discover that their miracle cure was actually a curse that would destroy everything they built. The game's enemy design reinforces this Gothic atmosphere by drawing on classic horror imagery and transforming it through the Lovecraftian lens. The early enemies are clearly human or recently human, their transformations incomplete, allowing players to see the tragedy of citizens becoming monsters. As the hunter progresses, enemies become increasingly alien and cosmic, moving from wolves and mobs to brain creatures and amygdalas, from understandable threats to incomprehensible horrors. The architecture follows a similar progression, starting with recognizable Victorian Gothic buildings and gradually introducing impossible geometries and structures that hurt to look at because they exist partially in other dimensions. This progression mirrors the hunter's increasing insight, their growing awareness that the world is not what it seems, that beneath the veneer of Victorian civilization lurks cosmic horror beyond human comprehension. The relationship between Gehrman and the doll represents one of Bloodborne's most tragic subplots, a story of love, loss, and the terrible cost of trying to recreate what has been lost. Gehrman loved Lady Maria, his student and perhaps the most gifted hunter he ever trained. But Maria did not return his romantic feelings, viewing him as a mentor and nothing more. She eventually abandoned the hunt entirely after the atrocities at the fishing hamlet, horrified by what she had participated in and unable to continue serving the church that ordered such cruelty. Her departure broke something in Gehrman, who was left alone with his grief and memories. Unable to move on, he created the doll as a substitute, a perfect replica of Maria in appearance if not in spirit, something that would never leave him as the real Maria had. But the doll is not truly Maria, just as a painting is not the subject it depicts. She has Maria's appearance but none of her memories, her personality, or her agency. She is kind and gentle where Maria was fierce and conflicted. She serves willingly where Maria chose to abandon service. The doll is in many ways Gehrman's idealized version of Maria, a fantasy given form, and this makes her both more and less than human. The Great Ones or whatever cosmic force powers the hunter's dream gave the doll true consciousness, a soul or something like one, but she remains trapped by her nature and purpose. She cannot leave the dream, cannot rebel against her role, cannot become something other than what Gehrman designed her to be. Her kindness to hunters is genuine, but it is also all she is permitted to be, her entire existence dedicated to supporting others. Gehrman's tragedy is that even surrounded by the doll's kindness, even having created a perfect replica of the woman he loved, he remains profoundly alone. The doll is not Maria and never will be. She cannot fill the void that Maria's departure created. Gehrman sits in his wheelchair, surrounded by white flowers like those that grew in Maria's favorite places, watched over by a being that wears Maria's face but is not her, bound to serve the moon presence in a dream that has become his prison. He has everything he thought he wanted: immortality, the ability to continue teaching hunters, a companion who will never leave him, and yet he begs to be released, pleading with the hunter to accept freedom so that at least someone can escape the trap he built for himself. His request that the hunter submit to being killed is not cruelty but compassion, Gehrman trying to spare them from the fate he endures. Every weapon and tool the hunter can use throughout Bloodborne tells a story about the hunt and those who participated in it. The saw cleaver, the iconic first weapon, is a brutally practical device, part saw, part axe, designed to tear through flesh and bone efficiently. It is a butcher's tool adapted for hunting, reflecting the reality that hunting beasts in Yharnam is not noble or elegant but savage and brutal. The transformation mechanism that allows it to change between compact and extended forms represents the adaptability required to survive, the need to shift tactics instantly as situations change. This trick weapon philosophy defines all of Yharnam's hunter armament, each weapon offering two distinct modes, each transformation smooth and practiced, the mark of tools designed through generations of refinement. Ludwig's Holy Blade represents the idealistic face of the hunt, a weapon that is both sword and greatsword, combining the elegance of a knight's weapon with overwhelming power. Ludwig believed the hunt was holy, that hunters were knights protecting the innocent from monstrous threats, and his weapon reflects this worldview. The blade gleams silver, untarnished by the blood it has spilled, maintaining its appearance of purity even when used for violence. But the weapon's heavy transformation, its shift from elegant sword to massive slab of metal, reveals the truth that Ludwig could not fully accept. The hunt requires overwhelming force and brutality, regardless of how one dresses it up in romantic imagery. Even the Holy Blade must become a crushing weapon to kill the most dangerous beasts, beauty and idealism transforming into raw destructive power. Maria's Rakuyo represents a different philosophy entirely, a weapon of pure skill and finesse. Dual blades that can be used separately or combined, emphasizing speed and precision over raw power. Maria fought with elegance even when forced to commit atrocities, maintaining her technique and discipline even as her faith in the hunt's righteousness collapsed. The Rakuyo's complexity, the skill required to master its various forms and combinations, reflects Maria's perfectionism and her belief that if one must kill, it should be done with precision rather than brutality. But she ultimately abandoned even this beautiful weapon, throwing the Rakuyo down a well in the fishing hamlet, unable to reconcile the elegance of her technique with the horror of the acts she performed with it. The weapon is perfect, but perfection in killing is still killing, and no amount of skill or beauty can redeem some actions. The moon in Bloodborne is not merely a celestial body but a character in its own right, present in every outdoor scene, hanging overhead in various states and colors, watching the events below with cosmic indifference. The red moon that dominates most of the game represents the blood moon of lunar eclipse, traditionally associated with omens and transformations. But in Bloodborne's cosmology, the moon is more than symbolic. It is the realm from which the moon presence observes and influences the world below, a dimensional gateway through which cosmic power flows into the mortal realm. The moon's color reflects the state of the barrier between worlds. Red when the veil is thin, pale when the nightmare deepens, and bloodier still when Ram's protective presence is removed. The progression of the moon throughout the game tracks the hunter's journey into cosmic awareness. At first, the moon is simply a backdrop, notable but not overtly threatening. After Ram's death, the moon becomes the blood moon, and its light reveals truths that were hidden before, making the amygdalas visible, changing enemy behaviors, and marking the point where the hunter has passed the threshold of too much knowledge to return to normal existence. The blood moon is not causing these changes but revealing what was always present, illuminating reality with a light that dispels the comfortable illusions that allowed humanity to function. Under the blood moon, Yharnam is revealed as it truly is, a cosmic feeding ground, a laboratory for Great One's experiments, a place where the barrier between planes of existence has been worn dangerously thin by repeated contact with forces beyond human comprehension. The moon also represents the unattainable nature of transcendence. It hangs overhead, beautiful and mysterious, seemingly close enough to touch but forever distant. Characters throughout Bloodborne's narrative reach for the moon metaphorically, seeking the enlightenment and power that cosmic awareness promises. But like the literal moon, these goals remain forever out of reach. Even those who achieve some form of ascension, like the hunter who consumes enough umbilical cords, find that reaching the moon means becoming something that no longer appreciates the achievement in human terms. The moon watches impassively as generations of humans destroy themselves in pursuit of its secrets, neither helping nor hindering, simply existing as a constant reminder that there are realities beyond human scale and concerns. The complete story of Bloodborne resolves into a deeply Lovecraftian revelation that the hunter's entire journey, all their struggles and achievements, were largely irrelevant to the cosmic forces that shaped events. The Great Ones were pursuing their own agenda, searching for surrogate children, experimenting with humanity as one might experiment with laboratory animals. The Healing Church, Byrgenworth, the School of Menses, all these human institutions believed they were taking action, making choices, pursuing their own goals, but in reality, they were responding to impulses and opportunities that the Great Ones created or allowed. The miracle of blood healing was never humanity's discovery, but a gift from beings who needed humanity to accept and consume their blood as part of the reproductive experiment. The hunter themselves is both agent and pawn, making real choices that have real consequences but operating within a framework designed by entities far more powerful. The three possible endings represent the range of outcomes the Great Ones find acceptable. If the hunter accepts release, they return to normal life, forgetting the cosmic truth, and another hunter will eventually take their place, keeping the cycle running. If the hunter takes Gehrman's place, they become the new host of the dream, continuing the system exactly as the moon presence designed it. Even if the hunter ascends to become a Great One, they leave behind a dream that will continue operating, a perpetual machine that generates powerful hunters who can be used by cosmic entities for purposes humans cannot fully understand. The hunter cannot break the system, only choose their role within it or opt out entirely, and even opting out simply allows the system to continue without them. This is the essential horror of Lovecraftian narrative that Bloodborne captures perfectly. The realization that human agency is limited, that our greatest achievements and most terrible mistakes are equally insignificant on cosmic scales, that the universe is fundamentally indifferent to human suffering or triumph. Yharnam is not unique but merely one example of countless civilizations that made contact with the Great Ones and were fundamentally altered or destroyed by that contact. The Themerians came before, and if humanity survives long enough, another civilization will likely make the same mistakes in the future. The cosmic will turns regardless of who is crushed beneath it, and knowledge of the wheel's existence does not grant the power to escape it. The hunter can become wise, powerful, even transcendent, but they cannot change the fundamental nature of reality or undo the cosmic tragedy that drives the Great Ones to repeatedly interfere with mortal civilizations. Bloodborne's narrative concludes, but the hunt itself never truly ends. This is explicit in the game structure, with New Game Plus allowing players to restart the journey with the same hunter, replaying events with increased difficulty. But it is also thematic, reflecting the cyclical nature of Yharnam's curse. The Night of the Hunt is not a single event but a recurring phenomenon, a loop built into reality by the attention of the Great Ones and the contracts humanity made seeking their power. Even if this particular hunter's story ends, either through accepting Gehrman's release, taking his place, or ascending beyond humanity entirely, other hunters will come. Other desperate souls will seek Yharnam's blood healing, other travelers will sign contracts without reading the fine print, and other warriors will awaken in the dream to find themselves bound to a hunt they did not choose and cannot fully understand. The citizens of Yharnam, those who survived the night's events, will wake in the morning with vague memories of the horrors that transpired. They will convince themselves it was not as bad as they remember, that surely the next blood ministration will be different, that the church will find a cure for the beast plague before it spreads further. The cycle of denial and repeated mistakes is built into human nature, our ability to rationalize and forget allowing us to make the same errors across generations. The Healing Church will continue operating as long as it has followers who believe in the healing blood, as long as there are sick and desperate people willing to try anything for a cure. And as long as the church continues its ministrations, the beast plague will continue spreading, and the hunt will continue being necessary, an endless feedback loop of problem and solution that actually perpetuates the problem it claims to solve. The cosmic entities will continue their own pursuits, searching for surrogate children, observing mortal civilizations, occasionally interfering in ways that seem incomprehensible from a human perspective. The moon presence will find a new host for the hunter's dream if needed, continuing to bind warriors to its service. Ebrietas will remain in the upper cathedral, alone and grieving, source of the church's blood and trap for their ambitions. The brain of Menses might be destroyed, but the nightmare it created will persist, echoing through time and dimensions. The Great Ones experience time differently than humans, and what seems like an ending from a mortal perspective is merely a transition from their cosmic viewpoint. The story of Bloodborne is one chapter in an endless book, a brief flicker of suffering and struggle that will be repeated with variations throughout eternity. We have descended through the streets of Yharnam, witnessed the fall of heroes and the birth of monsters, confronted cosmic entities that exist beyond human comprehension, and emerged with understanding of the terrible tapestry that binds these events together. Bloodborne tells the story of humanity's fatal flaw, our insatiable curiosity and ambition that drives us to seek knowledge and power beyond our capacity to safely possess. It is a story of civilizations that reached for divinity and grasped only damnation, of scholars who pursued enlightenment and found only madness, of cities built on miracles that were actually curses. Every character in this narrative, from the lowliest Yharnam citizen to the most powerful Great One, is trapped in cycles they cannot escape, driven by needs and desires that lead inevitably to suffering and transformation. The hunter's journey from desperate patient to cosmic entity or eternal guide represents the path that awaits anyone who seeks truth without understanding the price that truth demands. Knowledge in Bloodborne is not power but poison. Insight is not enlightenment but infection. And transcendence is not elevation but annihilation of the self. The game's Lovecraftian philosophy teaches that the universe operates on scales and logics that render human concerns meaningless, that what we call reality is merely a comfortable fiction maintained by ignorance, and that pulling back the veil reveals horrors that make ignorance seem blissful by comparison. Yet despite this bleakness, despite the futility and tragedy woven throughout the narrative, there is something almost noble in the hunter's persistence, their refusal to surrender even when confronted with cosmic impossibility. The legacy of Bloodborne extends beyond the game itself into the players who experience its narrative. We become hunters in our own right, descending into Yharnam's nightmare, struggling against its challenges, slowly piecing together the fragmented story from item descriptions, environmental details, and cryptic dialogues. The game respects players enough to hide its deepest truths, requiring active investigation and interpretation rather than explicit exposition. This structure mirrors the narrative's themes, making players work for every revelation, ensuring that understanding comes gradually and with effort, just as the hunter gains insight through painful experience. We emerge from the experience changed, having witnessed one of gaming's most complete and devastating explorations of cosmic horror, a story that uses interactive medium to create personal investment in tragedy that would be merely sad as passive entertainment. The nightmare of Bloodborne is explained but never fully resolved, for resolution is not possible in Lovecraftian horror. The best outcome is survival with understanding, accepting that some problems have no solutions and some truths offer no comfort. Yharnam will continue its cursed existence regardless of what any single hunter accomplishes. The Great Ones will continue their incomprehensible pursuits. The hunt will continue forever, or until some cosmic shift occurs beyond human ability to predict or influence. But individual hunters, individual humans, can still make choices about how they respond to impossible circumstances. They can accept ignorance, embrace transformation, or persist in defiance of cosmic indifference. These choices matter to the individual even if they do not matter to the universe. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the only meaning available in an indifferent cosmos is the meaning we create through our choices and struggles. This is the complete story of Bloodborne, the Lovecraftian nightmare explained in full, a tale of blood and madness, of hunters and beasts, of humans reaching for divinity and grasping only horror. It is a story that begins with hope and ends in the knowledge that hope was always an illusion, that the cure we sought was actually the disease, that the night of the hunt has no dawn waiting beyond it. Yet we persist in hunting because surrender is not in human nature, because even futile struggle is preferable to passive acceptance of doom. The hunter walks the streets of Yharnam Eternal, whether as living warrior, as guide in the dream, or as infant great one, forever bound to a cycle they cannot break but refuse to flee from. And in that terrible persistence, in that refusal to surrender even when all is lost, there exists something that might charitably be called heroism, or perhaps more accurately, the tragic stubbornness that defines humanity when confronted with the infinite dark.